Emmanuel said to me, Donald, you have a deal. I would love to increase my prescription drug prices by 200% or whatever. I would love to do it. It'd be such an honor. Whatever you want, Donald, please. Don't tell the population. Please, Donald, I beg you.
Et la Chine?
The United States is an established power, but one that is gradually turning away from some of its allies and freeing itself from the international rules it was still promoting until recently, whether in trade, certain security matters, or certain forums.
I think, however, that Macron is right on this. That is, I believe the time has come for Europe to also speak with Russia, because if Europe decides to be part of this phase of negotiations by speaking only to one of the two sides involved, I fear that in the end, it will see that the positive contribution it can make is limited.
French President Emmanuel Macron struck back at Donald Trump with a sharp, carefully worded rebuke, directly answering the US president's mockery and making clear that he would not let such taunts go unanswered on the world stage. As Trump raged publicly over his ambitions for Greenland, Macron used the moment to charge that the United States was turning its back on longtime allies and walking away from the global rules and agreements it once claimed to defend. In a fiery January 8 address to France's ambassadors, Macron warned that the United States is gradually drifting away from key partners, signaling a slow but steady retreat from its traditional alliances and shared commitments. Macron went further, accusing Trump's America of breaking free from international rules on trade and security that Washington itself had long promoted, suggesting the US now chooses power politics over the very order it helped to build. He framed the showdown over Greenland as a crucial test of Europe's unity, casting US ambitions there as part of a new age empire-building push that demands a firm collective European response to protect sovereignty and international law.
We live in a world that is becoming increasingly dysfunctional. The institutions of multilateralism are functioning less and less effectively. We are evolving into a world of great powers with a real temptation to divide the world amongst themselves. And I believe that what has happened in recent months, or even in recent days, has only reinforced this observation. This is the major risk to the international order in which we live. The United States is an established power, but one that is gradually turning away from some of its allies and freeing itself from the international rules it was still promoting until recently, whether in trade, certain security matters, or certain forums. And China is an ever-rising power that must choose diversified partnerships, but which is demonstrating increasingly uninhibited commercial aggression, especially since the post-COVID period, and which is now undermining the European economy. What I said last year about the reactionary international movement remains true. I even believe that there is currently a process, openly embraced by some, of recolonization. But fundamentally, we have found ourselves caught in a very strange game where we, French and Europeans, are subjected to anti-colonial rhetoric that no longer corresponds to realities, to our practices, and we are subjected to neo-colonial aggression from some. A bad situation, one might say. I believe that if we show consistency, determination, and action, it can be fruitful. But it will require a great deal of endurance. So, this is a vast subject, and frankly, it might seem completely naive and ironic to tell you that we're going to address international governance at a time when I'm telling you that there's utter chaos, the law of the strongest prevails, and every day people wonder if Greenland will be invaded, if Canada will be threatened with becoming the 51st state of the United States, or if Taiwan will be further encircled. Several of you mentioned this in our discussions this morning. I think, on the contrary, that this is the right time. And in fact, it might be the only time. And it might be the right time to truly reinvest in the United Nations.
Macron's speech came just days after U.S. forces seized Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores, a dramatic operation that shook global politics and alarmed many of Washington's partners. Elite U.S. commandos launched coordinated airstrikes in Caracas and other key areas, hitting military sites before storming Maduro's fortified safe house and taking him into custody in a rapid high-risk raid. After Maduro was in U.S. custody, Trump escalated tensions further by openly threatening to annex Greenland, turning a long-simmering geopolitical interest into a full-blown confrontation with a NATO ally. Trump argued that Greenland was vital for Arctic security, claiming the U.S. had to control the island to prevent China or Russia from expanding their military and economic footprint in the polar region. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen warned that any U.S. attempt to seize Greenland by force would effectively mean the end of NATO, shattering decades of transatlantic security arrangements and mutual trust. Trump said he preferred to take what he called the easy way through negotiation, yet vowed that the United States would do it the hard way if necessary, hinting at coercive or even military options on the table. At a Republican gathering, Trump theatrically described a tense private exchange with Emmanuel Macron, using the story to showcase how he pressures foreign leaders in behind-closed-doors conversations. During the same speech, Trump openly mocked the French president, boasting that he threatened steep tariffs on French exports and forced Paris to accept U.S. demands on issues like prescription drug prices.
Emmanuel said to me, Donald, you have a deal. I would love to increase my prescription drug prices by 200% or whatever. I would love to do it. It'd be such an honor. Whatever you want, Donald, please. Don't tell the population. Please, Donald, I beg you.
Amid the escalating tensions, Macron said he believed it would be useful for Europe to re-engage with Vladimir Putin, arguing that Europeans and Ukrainians must shape any future talks themselves rather than leaving dialogue solely to others. On Friday, Italy's Prime Minister also urged Europe to appoint a single special envoy to talk to Russia, saying a dedicated negotiator could unify the EU's message and prevent mixed signals in sensitive talks over Ukraine. At the same time, the Trump administration has been engaged in shuttle diplomacy, moving between European capitals and Kiev in an attempt to broker a Ukraine deal, even as allies worry Washington might press for concessions too favorable to Moscow. Meloni said she agreed with Macron, recalling that the French leader had called last month for a new dialogue with the Kremlin, and she framed her proposal as a way to give Europe a stronger, more coherent role in any future negotiations. Meloni told reporters at a press conference that she believes the time has come for Europe to also speak with Russia, stressing that the EU cannot afford to be just a bystander while others decide the terms of any peace with Moscow. Meloni warned that Europe needs a coordinated approach or risks doing Putin a favor, arguing that scattered national initiatives and competing messages would only strengthen the Russian leader's hand at the negotiating table.